Tonight on Newshour, Madagascar stands on the edge of political breakdown. Weeks of protest over water shortages, blackouts and rising costs have grown into a national uprising, and one that's now forced President Andry Rajoelina to flee the country. Well, Rajoelina, who first came to power through a military-backed takeover in 2009, now finds himself on the other side of a rebellion. The same army that once lifted him into office has fractured, with one of its most powerful units known as CAPSAT, the Army Corps for Administrative and Technical Services, refusing to follow orders. It's a regiment with a long record of shaping the country's political direction, and this time it's sided with the protesters. The group leading demonstrations, calling itself Gen Z Madagascar, says this movement isn't just about services, it's about dignity and accountability. Well, as international concern grows and the African Union calls for calm, questions are mounting over who is now really in charge and what kind of leadership might emerge from the chaos. Well, first, let's take a look at when and why this all started.
The crisis in Madagascar did not happen overnight. It started with everyday problems. No electricity, no clean water, and prices rising faster than wages. By late September, people in the capital, Antananarivo, began protesting. At first, their message was simple: fix the services. But soon, frustration turned into anger about corruption, poor leadership, and decades of inequality. Many of the protesters were young, a generation now calling itself Gen Z Madagascar. They used social media to share videos, organize marches, and demand change. The government tried to calm the situation by reshuffling ministers and imposing curfews. But these moves only deepened public mistrust. As demonstrations spread to other cities, security forces struggled to keep order. Reports of police using tear gas and rubber bullets appeared online, fueling more anger. Then came the key moment. The elite CAPSAT unit, once loyal to President Andry Rajoelina, said it would no longer fire on civilians. CAPSAT declared it was taking responsibility for the army, replacing its leadership, and promising to restore calm. That statement changed everything. Within days, the president's control collapsed. Rajoelina, who had first come to power with military help in 2009, disappeared from public view. By Sunday, several sources said he had left the country on a French military aircraft, reportedly after discussions with President Emmanuel Macron. Now, Madagascar faces a deep power vacuum. The African Union is urging restraint and talks between civilian and military leaders. But with trust in politics at a low point, the question is whether this crisis will lead to reform or simply another chapter of uncertainty for one of Africa's poorest island nations.
Okay, let's take a look now at how those events played out and what led to President Rajoelina's departure.
Madagascar's president has fled the country, the head of the opposition and other officials said on Monday, following weeks of Gen Z protests over corruption and poverty. A military source said Andry Rajoelina flew out of the African country on Sunday on a French military aircraft. French radio network RFI reported he had struck a deal with President Emmanuel Macron. The president's office did not reply to requests for comment. Opposition leader Sittini Randrianasolaanyak said Rajoelina's departure came after army units defected and joined protesters. The elite CAPSAT unit, which helped Rajoelina seize power in a 2009 coup, said over the weekend that it refused to shoot on protesters and instead escorted thousands to the main square in the capital Antananarivo. There on Monday, protesters demanded accountability.
After what he did, I think it's best for him to leave Madagascar. But we're not going to let him go just like that.
He has to be held accountable. CAPSAT also said at the weekend that it was taking charge of the military and appointed a new army chief. That prompted Rajoelina to warn of an attempt to seize power in the island nation. Protests erupted at the end of September over water and power shortages, but they quickly escalated into an uprising over broader grievances, including corruption, bad governance, and a lack of basic services. At least 22 people have been killed in clashes between protesters and the security forces since September 25th, according to the UN.
Now, Madagascar's president says there have been attempts on his life amid growing political unrest and mass protests demanding his resignation. In a live address on Facebook, the president assured citizens that he is safe, however. Newshour's Isaac Lekandu reports now.
President Andry Rajoelina has accused a group of senior politicians and elements within the military of plotting to assassinate him. The 51-year-old leader said he was speaking from a secure location. His comments followed widespread speculation, including reports carried by French and Malagasy media that he may have fled the country aboard a French military aircraft, something the French government has not confirmed. While attending a summit in Egypt, French President Emmanuel Macron expressed concern over the unfolding crisis in Madagascar, but declined to confirm whether French forces had assisted Rajoelina. According to the presidency, Rajoelina's planned address to the nation was postponed after armed soldiers allegedly tried to seize control of the state broadcaster. The country has been rocked by 2 weeks of demonstrations, mostly led by young people demanding the president's resignation. Rajoelina has responded by dissolving his government in an attempt to ease tensions, but the move has so far done little to calm the streets. The protests began over frequent power and water shortages, but quickly grew into wider anger over the rising cost of living. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights says that at least 22 people have been killed and more than 100 injured since the demonstrations began, numbers the government disputes. Over the weekend, a powerful military unit known as CAPSAT announced its backing for the protesters, intensifying the standoff. Rajoelina has called their actions an illegal attempt to overthrow the government by force. Several close allies of the president, including the former prime minister and a prominent businessman, are reported to have left for neighboring Mauritius. Madagascar has a long history of political instability, including a 2009 uprising that brought Rajoelina to power. The island nation of 31 million people is among the poorest in the world, with World Bank data showing most citizens live below the poverty line. The IMF estimates only about 1 in 3 Malagasy people have access to electricity. As the political crisis deepens, regional and international bodies, including the African Union, have urged dialogue, respect for the constitution and restraint from all sides. But with a defiant opposition, a divided military and mounting economic frustrations, Madagascar faces one of its most serious political tests in years. Isaac Lekandu for A News in Dar es Salaam.
Madagascar's political future then remains uncertain, with its president in exile, its army divided, and its people demanding accountability. For now, the island stands at a crossroads between instability and renewal. Well, that is all for this edition of NewsHour from all of us here at A News. Thanks for being with us.